The federal opposition's push for a national vote on the carbon tax has been voted down in the Senate. It amended the plebiscite proposal, but it failed to secure the vote of Family First Senator Steve Fielding. So where does it leave the opposition now? Well, to get more on this, our political editor Lyndal Curtis is speaking to the Coalition's climate action spokesman Greg Hunt.
Greg Hunt, welcome to News 24.
Good afternoon, Lyndal.
Steve Fielding has effectively killed off your plebiscite proposal in the Senate. Are you going to pursue it in the House of Representatives?
Well, we will put it to the House of Representatives, but nothing stops the Australian Labor Party and nothing stops the Australian government from giving the people a say. They have two choices. They could table the carbon tax bill with the details and give the people a vote, or they could allow a plebiscite, because what we've learnt this week is the Australian people want their say, and what we've learnt this week is that the Labor Party, the Prime Minister, doesn't trust the Australian people to have their say.
But if you couldn't even convince Senator Fielding, who has voted with the opposition a number of times in his career, how do you think first you're going to convince anyone in the House of Representatives to vote for it and then convince the government?
Well, I will never presume upon the votes of independents. What I will say is that it is absolutely clear in every poll that has been taken to date that the Australian people do not want a carbon tax and they do want a say. And it's very clear then that we have a government that simply will not trust the Australian people to have their own say.
But don't the Australian people get a say? This bill will first go to the Parliament, and the people's representatives in the Parliament will deliver a verdict on it. And then, if it gets through, not too long after it's been introduced, they'll have a say at an election.
The problem is precisely the opposite, that the Australian people haven't had a say and will not have a say. Whenever it does come, the next election will be a referendum on a carbon tax. But let us not start the process and the damage without first giving the Australian people their chance, their opportunity. As everybody knows, the Prime Minister ruled out this carbon tax before the election and then ruled it in after the election. The decent, the honourable, the responsible thing to do would be to announce the details and give the people a say and to trust them with their own decision.
If you get into government and you have to change your election promises, change the promises you made in an election campaign, break promises because of changed circumstances, will you then take that change to an election before you implement it?
Well, let me give you an example of what we have actually done. John Howard changed his position on a goods and services tax.
But he didn't take work choices to an election before he introduced it.
He changed his position on a goods and services tax, which was a major new proposal, and it is the only comparable proposal in terms of scope and scale and impact. He had the courage of his convictions and he took it to an election. So our view is that this government should take a case, if they believe in it, for higher electricity and petrol and gas and grocery taxes to the people.
Tony Abbott said of the now defunct proposal before the election from the Prime Minister for a Citizens' Assembly, saying we already have a Citizens' Assembly, it's called a Parliament. This is a decision for the Parliament. And she, the Prime Minister, can't subcontract out leadership to some kind of giant focus group. Isn't a plebiscite just a big giant focus group?
Well, unfortunately, the problem is that the Prime Minister took completely the alternative, not a minor variation, but completely the alternative policy to the election, knowing that it was never her intention to abide by her pledge to the Australian people of no carbon tax. The government has cited changed circumstances. That's bunkum. The reason why it's bunkum is because they would always have to have done a deal with the Greens in the Senate. They knew that they were going to implement a carbon tax. They knew they had to do it. They deceived the Australian people, and that's why on this rare occasion, something of such monumental import should be taken to the people if the government is not willing to take it to an election.
Just so I understand this, if you're in government and you do have to make a major change to policy because circumstances have changed, you would put that in a plebiscite, or would you reserve it for only something where the Labor Party's changed its mind?
Fundamental pledges, foundation pledges, systemic pledges which go to the heart of governance, which go to the heart of people's cost of living, are the right thing to take to an election. That's my view. That's what I believe in, and that's the approach which we will take.
Greg Hunt, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.